The thunder cracked like a whip across the darkening Nebraska sky as Lily Davidson sprinted across the dusty main street of Lincoln. Her skirts hiked above her ankles, ignoring the scandalized gasps from Mrs. Holloway sweeping her storefront. The heavens were about to open up, and Lily had promised Sheriff Williams she'd deliver medicine to the Yates Ranch before nightfall, storm or no storm. Nebraska Territory, 1867. 2 years after the war had ended, and Lincoln was still struggling to find its footing. Buildings were going up, a proper town was forming, but the wildness of the frontier still clung to everything like dust on boots. Lily had arrived 6 months ago to serve as the town's schoolteacher, though her duties often extended far beyond reading and arithmetic. Miss Davidson. "You ain't planning on riding out in this weather, are you?" Mr. Franklin called from the general store doorway, concern etched on his weathered face. "I gave my word, Mr. Franklin," Lily called back, tightening the strings of her bonnet. "The sheriff said little Thomas Yates has been running a fever for 2 days now. Dr. Simmons prepared this tonic specially." The apothecary packet felt heavy in her pocket, heavier than its physical weight warranted. She'd heard stories of the widower Yates, a man who'd lost his wife in childbirth 3 years prior. Some called him the finest horseman in 3 counties. Others whispered he was half wild himself, having fought in the war and returned changed, as so many had. All Lily knew was that his 6-year-old son needed medicine, and she'd volunteered to deliver it when no one else would brave the coming storm. "At least take my slicker," Mr. Franklin insisted, disappearing inside only to return moments later with an oilskin coat. "That fancy eastern cape of yours won't keep you dry 10 minutes in a Nebraska thunderstorm." Lily accepted the coat with a grateful smile. "I'll return it tomorrow when I come for supplies. You just return yourself in one piece, Miss Davidson. That'll be plenty." Within minutes, Lily was astride her mare, Penny, and riding east out of town. The wind picked up, whipping strands of auburn hair across her face that had escaped her tight bun. In the distance, lightning illuminated the rolling hills in brilliant flashes of white against an angry purple-black sky. Penny nickered nervously beneath her. "It's all right, girl," Lily murmured, patting the horse's neck. "Just a few more miles." The first fat raindrops began to fall as the Yates Ranch came into view, a sturdy 2-story cabin with a wraparound porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings nestled in a valley between 2 sloping hills. It was a handsome property, though Lily could see even from a distance that it needed a woman's touch. The flower beds that once must have brightened the front of the house were overgrown with weeds, and the porch railings needed fresh paint. As Lily approached, the front door burst open and a tall man with broad shoulders emerged, shielding his eyes against the rain. Even from a distance, Lily could see the wariness in his stance. "Mr. Yates," she called out, urging Penny toward the hitching post. "I'm Lily Davidson, the schoolteacher from town. Sheriff Williams asked me to bring medicine for your boy." The man strode down the steps, his movements fluid despite his obvious caution. As he drew closer, Lily's breath caught. Jackson Yates was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 or so, with a strong jawline partially hidden beneath a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, a startling blue even in the dim light, assessed her quickly. "Miss Davidson," he acknowledged with a slight nod, reaching up to help her down from her horse. His hands were strong and calloused as they circled her waist, lifting her easily to the ground. "You shouldn't have come out in this weather." "Your son needs medicine," Lily replied simply, reaching into her pocket for the packet. "How is he?" A flash of lightning illuminated the worry lines around Jackson's eyes. "The fever's holding." "He's a tremendous crack of thunder split the air, and both Lily and Penny jumped. "Let's get your horse in the barn," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the worsening conditions. "Then I'll take you to Thomas." Lily nodded, suddenly aware of how soaked she'd become despite Mr. Franklin's slicker. She followed Jackson to the barn, helping him settle Penny in an empty stall next to his own magnificent stallion, a glossy black beast that eyed them warily. "That's Thunderhead," Jackson explained, catching her admiring glance. "Best cutting horse in the territory, though with a temper to match his name." As they hurried from the barn to the house, the skies opened completely. By the time they reached the porch, they were both drenched, and the wind had picked up to a howl. "You're not riding back tonight," Jackson stated firmly, holding the door open for her. It wasn't a question. No one should be out in this. Lily hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Thomas needs his medicine anyway. I should stay to make sure it takes effect." The interior of the Yates home was surprisingly warm and clean, though Spartan. A fire burned in the large stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across simple but sturdy furniture. There were few decorative touches: a quilt here, a painted tin cup there, but what struck Lily most was the abundance of books. Shelves lined one entire wall, filled with volumes both practical and literary. "You like to read," she observed, unable to keep the pleased surprise from her voice. Something like defensiveness flickered across Jackson's face. A man needs occupation during long winter evenings. Before Lily could respond, a small voice called out from upstairs. "Pa, is someone here?" Jackson's expression softened immediately. "Yes, Thomas. The teacher from town has brought your medicine. I'll bring her up." He turned to Lily. "You can leave your wet things by the fire to dry. There's a robe of my late wife's hanging on the peg there if you'd like something dry to change into while your dress dries." Lily nodded gratefully, already shivering in her damp clothing. "I'll just be a moment." Once Jackson had disappeared up the narrow staircase, Lily quickly changed into the offered robe, a simple blue cotton wrapper that was slightly too large but blissfully dry. She hung her soaked dress and petticoats near the fire, then gathered the medicine packet and a cup of water from the kitchen pump before heading upstairs. She found Jackson sitting on the edge of a small bed, one large hand smoothing back damp hair from a child's forehead. The boy was small for 6, with the same striking blue eyes as his father, though now glassy with fever. His cheeks were flushed, and even from the doorway, Lily could hear his labored breathing. "Thomas," Jackson said gently, "this is Miss Davidson. She's the new schoolteacher in town, and she's brought you something to help you feel better." The child's eyes flickered to Lily, wariness and curiosity battling with obvious discomfort. "Hello," he managed, his voice raspy. Lily approached with a warm smile, kneeling beside the bed. "Hello, Thomas. You can call me Miss Lily if you like. I've brought some medicine from Dr. Simmons that should help bring down your fever." She measured out the dark liquid into a spoon. "It might taste a bit bitter, but it will help you breathe easier." Thomas wrinkled his nose but obediently opened his mouth for the medicine, then accepted the cup of water Lily offered afterward. "Good boy," she praised, feeling his forehead with her cool hand. He was burning up. "The doctor says you need to drink plenty of water and rest." Another crash of thunder shook the house, and Thomas flinched violently, his small hand clutching at his father's sleeve. "Pa," he whispered, eyes wide with terror, "it's coming closer." Jackson placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "It's just noise, son. Remember what I told you. It can't hurt you in here." But Thomas was trembling now, his breathing becoming more rapid. "It's angry, Pa, like the cannons, like when the men were shouting." Lily glanced questioningly at Jackson, who met her gaze with a grim expression. "Thomas was born during a thunderstorm," he explained quietly. "Sarah, my wife, died that same night. He's been terrified of storms ever since. Being sick only makes it worse." Understanding dawned on Lily. The poor child associated storms not only with the loss of his mother, but also, perhaps, with his father's wartime experiences, which he must have overheard being discussed. Another lightning flash illuminated the room, followed almost immediately by a deafening crash of thunder. Thomas cried out, burying his face against his father's side. "It's directly overhead now," Jackson said, his voice deliberately calm as he stroked his son's back. "But it will pass, Thomas. Storms always do. The boy wasn't consoled. His thin shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Lily could see that his distress was only worsening his already compromised breathing. "Thomas," she said softly, "would you like me to tell you a story? Sometimes a good story can help us forget about the storm outside." The child peeked out from his father's side, clearly torn between his fear and interest. "What kind of story?" "Any kind you like," Lily offered. "I know stories about brave knights and clever foxes, about sailors who crossed oceans and settlers who built towns. I know stories about children just like you who did remarkable things." "Do you know any stories about horses?" Thomas asked, his voice small but hopeful. Lily smiled. "As a matter of fact, I know several excellent horse stories." Jackson gave her a grateful look. "I'll go make some tea," he said, carefully extracting himself from his son's grip. "Miss Davidson will stay right here with you." As Jackson left the room, Lily settled herself in the chair beside Thomas's bed. "Have you ever heard the story of the little paint pony who saved an entire wagon train?" She began, and was rewarded with Thomas's eager headshake. For the next hour, as the storm raged outside, Lily spun tales of remarkable horses and their adventures. With each story, Thomas's breathing eased slightly, and though he still flinched at particularly loud thunder claps, his attention remained fixed on Lily's words. Jackson returned with tea, then silently disappeared again, only to return with a tray of simple bread and stew. He placed it beside Lily with a murmured thanks, and took up a position leaning against the doorframe, listening as intently as his son. And so the stallion led the entire herd to safety across the river, just as the forest fire reached the bank. Lily concluded her third story, noticing that Thomas's eyelids were growing heavy despite his determination to stay awake. "Another one, please, Miss Lily," he requested, stifling a yawn. "The storm's still here." Lily glanced toward the window where rain still lashed against the glass, though the thunder had grown somewhat more distant. "One more," she agreed, "but this one is special. It's about a star that fell from the sky." "Stars can't fall," Thomas protested sleepily. "Ah, but this one did," Lily insisted with a smile. "It fell right into a meadow where a young colt was grazing." By the time she finished this gentler tale, Thomas had drifted off to sleep, his breathing easier, his small face peaceful despite the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. Lily rose quietly from the chair, stretching muscles stiff from sitting so long. Jackson motioned for her to follow him downstairs, and she did so, careful to avoid the creaking step he pointed out. Back in the main room, the fire had burned low. Jackson added another log, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. "Thank you," he said simply, turning to face her. "I've never seen him sleep during a storm before." Lily smiled, suddenly aware that she was still wearing the blue wrapper that had belonged to his wife. "You're welcome. He's a sweet boy, bright, too. He'll do well in school when he's recovered." Jackson's eyes flicked to the blue fabric, then quickly away. "Sarah would have wanted it put to good use," he said, answering her unspoken concern. "Please sit. Your dress is probably still damp." Lily settled into a chair near the fire, accepting the cup of coffee Jackson offered. "How long has Thomas been afraid of storms?" "Since he was old enough to notice them," Jackson replied, taking the seat opposite her. "Sarah died during the worst thunderstorm I'd ever seen. I was fighting in Tennessee at the time, by the time the letter reached me." He trailed off, staring into the flames. "I'm sorry," Lily said softly. "It must have been terrible, coming home to find her gone and a baby to care for." Jackson nodded, his face half in shadow. "The war was ending by then anyway. I came back to a different world than the one I'd left. Sometimes I think Thomas senses that the brokenness of it all, maybe that's why the storms frighten him so much." "Children are remarkably perceptive," Lily agreed, "but also remarkably resilient. With time and patience, he can learn not to fear them so deeply." "You speak as if from experience, Miss Davidson." Lily smiled faintly. "I grew up in Boston with 4 younger brothers. Our father was a ship's captain, often away for months at a time. I learned a great deal about calming children's fears. And yet you chose to come west alone. Jackson's question held no judgment, only curiosity. After our parents died of influenza 3 years ago, my brothers were old enough to make their own way. James joined the Navy like our father, John went to law school, Joseph apprenticed to a carpenter, and little Jeremy, who's not so little anymore, is studying medicine. Lily turned the coffee cup in her hands. I'd always wanted to see more of the country, to do something meaningful. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Nebraska territory, it seemed like an opportunity. It was brave of you, Jackson said quietly. The territories can be harsh, especially for a woman alone. Not so different from anywhere, really, Lily replied. People need the same things whether in Boston or Nebraska: knowledge, kindness, purpose. Jackson studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. You're not what I expected when they said the schoolteacher was coming with medicine. Lily raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at her lips despite herself. And what did you expect, Mr. Yates? An elderly spinster with a pinched face and sensible shoes. To her surprise, Jackson laughed, a rich, warm sound that transformed his face entirely. Something like that, yes. Though the shoes would be muddy now, regardless. Their conversation flowed more easily after that. Jackson told her about his ranch, his plans to expand his horse breeding operation, the challenges and rewards of raising Thomas alone. Lily spoke of her classroom, her 22 students ranging from 5 to 16, and her efforts to create a proper library for the town. The storm gradually subsided to a gentle rain, and the hour grew late. Twice, Jackson checked on Thomas, returning to report that the boy was sleeping soundly, his fever noticeably reduced. You should get some rest, Jackson said eventually, noticing Lily trying to stifle a yawn. You can take my room, I'll sleep down here. Oh, I couldn't possibly, please, Jackson interrupted. I insist. You've ridden through a storm and sat with my son for hours. It's the least I can offer. Too tired to argue further, Lily nodded gratefully. Thank you. I should check on Thomas once more before I sleep, though. They climbed the stairs together, pausing at Thomas's doorway. The boy was sleeping peacefully, his breathing much easier than before. Jackson reached out unconsciously, his hand brushing against Lily's arm as they both turned to leave. The touch, though brief and unintentional, sent an unexpected warmth through Lily. Good night, Miss Davidson, Jackson said softly, showing her to his room across the hall. And thank you again. Good night, Mr. Yates, Lily replied, suddenly very aware of how alone they were in this house, miles from town. I'll see you in the morning. Alone in Jackson's room, Lily took in the sparse but comfortable furnishings: a large bed with a handmade quilt, a sturdy dresser, a small writing desk by the window. On the desk sat a framed daguerreotype of a pretty young woman with a gentle smile. Sarah Yates, Lily presumed, feeling a strange pang in her chest. She extinguished the lamp and slipped beneath the quilt, listening to the soft patter of rain on the roof. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her for some time as she thought about the widower and his storm-frightened son, and the unexpected connection she already felt to both of them. The morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous night's storm had never happened. Lily woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of quiet voices downstairs. She dressed quickly in her now dry clothing, folded the blue wrapper carefully, and made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Jackson at the stove while Thomas, still in his nightshirt but looking remarkably improved, sat at the table with a mug of milk. Miss Lily, the boy exclaimed when he saw her, his face lighting up. Pa said you stayed all night because of the storm. Did you know we have a new calf? Pa says I can see it if my cough is better, and it is. Listen, he demonstrated by taking a deep breath without coughing. Good morning, Thomas, Lily smiled, pleased to see him so much improved. That's wonderful news about both your cough and the calf. Good morning, Mr. Yates. Jackson turned from the stove, spatula in hand, and Lily was struck again by how handsome he was, especially now, with the morning light streaming through the window and a rare smile softening his features. "Good morning, Miss Davidson. I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Lily replied, suddenly shy. "The medicine seems to have worked wonders." "The medicine and the stories," Jackson corrected, placing a plate of eggs and bacon before her as she sat down. "Thomas has been asking all morning when you'll tell him another one." "Please, Miss Lily," Thomas looked at her eagerly. "The one about the star wasn't finished when I fell asleep," Lily laughed. "Well, we can't leave a story unfinished, can we? Perhaps after breakfast." The meal was simple but delicious, and the conversation flowed easily between the three of them. Thomas chattered about the horses, his favorite books, and his excitement about starting school once he was fully recovered. Lily found herself charmed by the boy's enthusiasm and his father's obvious devotion. After they'd eaten, Jackson insisted on showing Lily the new calf, with Thomas bundled up against the morning chill. The ranch looked entirely different in daylight, the hills around them green and rolling, the outbuildings well-maintained despite the weathered paint, the corral holding several beautiful horses that raised their heads curiously as they approached. "You have a lovely home, Mr. Yates," Lily observed as they walked back from the barn, Thomas running ahead to chase a butterfly. "Jackson, please," he said, his eyes on his son, "and thank you. It's not much compared to what you must be used to in Boston, but it's ours." "I think it's wonderful," Lily said honestly, "and please call me Lily." Jackson stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Lily," he said, as if testing the name, "I want you to know how grateful I am for what you did last night. Not just bringing the medicine, but staying with Thomas, telling him stories. It's been a long time since he's had a woman's kindness." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "It was my pleasure. He's a remarkable boy. He likes you," Jackson said simply. "He doesn't warm to people easily." "I like him too," Lily replied, then added more softly, "and I've enjoyed meeting his father as well." Something shifted in Jackson's eyes, a flicker of interest quickly masked by caution. He cleared his throat. "I should get you back to town. People will be wondering where you've gone." The ride back to Lincoln was pleasant, with Thomas sitting before Lily on Penny while Jackson rode Thunderhead alongside them. The boy peppered Lily with questions about the school, the books she had there, and whether she knew any more horse stories. By the time the town came into view, Lily had promised to lend him several books once he was well enough to attend classes. As they approached the main street, Lily became aware of curious glances from townspeople. Mrs. Holloway stopped sweeping her porch, and Mr. Franklin emerged from his store, relief evident on his face when he spotted her. "Looks like we've caused a stir," Jackson murmured, his expression closing off as he noticed the attention. "Small towns," Lily said with a slight shrug. "Everyone notices when the schoolteacher doesn't come home during a storm." Jackson helped her down from Penny, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you again," he said formally, "for bringing the medicine and for your kindness to my son." "You're welcome," Lily replied, suddenly aware that something had changed between them, a return to the polite distance of strangers, despite the connection they'd formed overnight. "I hope Thomas continues to improve. Please bring him to school when Dr. Simmons says he's ready." Jackson nodded, then helped his son down from Lily's horse. "Say thank you to Miss Davidson, Thomas." "Thank you, Miss Lily," the boy said earnestly. "Will you tell me the end of the star story when I come to school?" "I promise," Lily smiled, resisting the urge to smooth his tousled hair. With a tip of his hat, Jackson mounted Thunderhead, pulled Thomas up in front of him, and turned back toward their ranch. Lily watched them go, feeling an inexplicable sense of loss. "Miss Davidson," Sheriff Williams approached, concern evident on his weathered face. "We were about to send a search party. You didn't come back last night." "The storm was too severe," Lily explained, turning to face him. "Mr. Yates kindly offered shelter for the night. Thomas is much improved with the medicine." The sheriff's expression relaxed. "That's good to hear." Yates is a good man if a bit solitary since his wife passed. Did right by you, offering shelter. Yes, he did, Lily agreed, her thoughts still with the quiet rancher and his story-loving son. He most certainly did. In the weeks that followed, Lily found herself thinking often of the Yates Ranch and its inhabitants. Thomas had recovered fully and began attending school, quickly becoming one of her most enthusiastic pupils. He devoured books faster than she could supply them and showed a natural aptitude for mathematics that impressed her greatly. Jackson, however, remained distant. He brought Thomas to school each morning and collected him in the afternoon, exchanging polite greetings with Lily but never lingering for conversation. It puzzled, and if she were honest with herself, disappointed her. She'd felt a connection forming that night during the storm, something beyond mere friendliness, but perhaps she'd imagined it. Spring advanced across the Nebraska prairie, bringing longer days and the vibrant green of new growth. Lily's classroom windows stood open to catch the breeze as 22 children bent over their slates, carefully forming letters or working through arithmetic problems. "Miss Davidson," Thomas's hand shot up. "I've finished all my sums. May I read now?" Lily smiled at his eagerness. "Let me check your work first, Thomas." She was examining his nearly perfect arithmetic when a commotion outside drew their attention. A rider was coming fast down the main street, his horse lathered with sweat. As he drew closer, Lily recognized him as one of the hands from the Yates Ranch. "Miss Davidson," the man called, reining his horse to a stop outside the schoolhouse. "Mr. Yates sent me. There's been an accident, he's hurt bad. The boy needs to come home and Mr. Yates is asking for you if you're willing." Lily's heart lurched. "Of course," she said immediately, turning to her oldest student. "Mary, please go fetch Dr. Simmons and tell him to come to the Yates Ranch immediately. James, run to the sheriff's office and explain what's happened. Tell him I've gone with Thomas." The children sprang into action as Lily quickly gathered her things and Thomas's. The boy stood frozen, his face pale with fear. "Is Pa going to die?" he whispered as Lily knelt before him. "No, sweetheart," she assured him, though her own fear churned inside her. "Your father is strong and Dr. Simmons will help him. We'll go to him right now." Within minutes they were on the road, Thomas riding with the ranch hand while Lily followed on Penny. The boy was silent, his small shoulders rigid with tension. "What happened?" Lily asked the hand, a young man named Charlie she'd met briefly during her previous visit. "Breaking a new stallion," Charlie explained grimly. "Horse threw him against the corral fence, then trampled him before we could get it under control. His right leg's broken for sure, and he took a hard kick to the ribs. He was conscious when I left, but in a bad way, madam." Lily's worry deepened. A broken leg was serious enough, but internal injuries from a horse's kick could be fatal. She urged Penny faster, praying they wouldn't be too late. When they arrived at the ranch, Thomas leaped from Charlie's horse before it had fully stopped and ran for the house. Lily dismounted quickly and followed. Inside, she found Jackson lying on his bed, his face gray with pain, his right leg splinted with makeshift boards. An older ranch hand sat beside him, looking profoundly relieved when Lily entered. "Miss Davidson," the man said, standing. "Thank God, he's been asking for you. I'll leave you to it." As the man departed, Thomas climbed onto the bed beside his father, careful not to jostle him. "Pa." "Miss Lily's here." Jackson's eyes opened slowly, focusing with effort. "Thomas," he breathed, then his gaze shifted to Lily. "You came." "Of course I came," Lily said, approaching the bed and sitting in the vacated chair. She reached for his hand without thinking, finding it cold and clammy. "Doctor Simmons is on his way. How bad is it?" "Bad enough," Jackson admitted, grimacing as he tried to shift position. "Legs broken in at least 2 places. Ribs are worse." Lily squeezed his hand gently. "We'll get you through this." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Wasn't sure you'd want to, given how I've been avoiding you." "Hush," Lily admonished, acutely aware of Thomas watching them both. "We'll talk about that when you're better. Thomas, can you fetch some fresh water? Your father needs to drink." The boy nodded solemnly and slipped from the room, leaving them briefly alone. "I mean it," Jackson said, his voice low and strained. "I've been a fool. After that night during the storm, I started thinking maybe. But then I got scared. Thomas was already so attached to you, and if I let myself—" He broke off, coughing, his face contorting in pain. "Don't talk now," Lily urged, genuinely alarmed by his pallor. "Save your strength." He shook his head stubbornly. "Need to say it in case, if I don't make it, you will make it," Lily interrupted fiercely. "If I don't," he persisted, "I need you to know I've never met anyone like you. The way you were with Thomas, the stories you told, your courage riding out in that storm. I started falling for you that night, Lily Davidson." Lily's heart thundered in her chest, but before she could respond, Thomas returned with the water, and moments later, Dr. Simmons arrived. The next hours passed in a blur as the doctor set Jackson's leg properly and examined his ribs and abdomen, his expression grave. "3 broken ribs," he informed Lily privately as they stepped outside the bedroom. "And I'm concerned about internal bleeding. The next 24 hours will tell. He needs constant watching." "I'll stay," Lily said without hesitation. "What about your school?" The doctor asked, though there was no real question in his tone. "Sheriff Williams can find a substitute for a few days. These children need me more right now." Dr. Simmons nodded. "I've given him laudanum for the pain. Try to keep him still and get as much water into him as you can." "I'll return tomorrow morning." After the doctor left, Lily found Thomas sitting on the porch steps, his knees drawn up to his chest, staring out at the corral where his father had been injured. "Your father is resting now," Lily said gently, sitting beside him. "Doctor, Simmons has done everything he can." "Is Pa going to die like Ma did?" Thomas asked, his voice small but direct. Lily put her arm around his thin shoulders. "Your father is fighting very hard to stay with you, Thomas, and he's much stronger than he looks right now. We need to help him by being strong too." The boy looked up at her, his blue eyes so like his father's, filled with desperate hope. "Will you tell stories to make him better, like you did for me during the storm?" Lily hugged him closer. "I'll tell all the stories I know if it will help." That evening, after making sure Jackson was as comfortable as possible and helping Thomas with his evening chores, Lily set up a makeshift bed in the corner of Jackson's room. Thomas insisted on staying too, curling up in a chair beside his father's bed until he finally drifted off to sleep. Lily carefully carried the exhausted boy to his own room and tucked him in, then returned to Jackson's side. In the dim lamplight, she could see the pain etched in his features even as he slept. Gently, she placed a cool cloth on his forehead and adjusted his covers. "I'm here," she whispered, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "I'm not going anywhere." Throughout the night, Jackson's fever rose and fell. During his more lucid moments, Lily helped him drink water and take small sips of the broth she'd prepared. During the worst periods, when pain and fever made him restless, she spoke to him softly, telling stories, reciting poetry, anything to keep him connected to the world. Near dawn, during a particularly bad spell when Jackson seemed caught in some terrible half-dream, calling out for Thomas and thrashing despite his injuries, Lily did something she'd seen her mother do for her father during his worst bouts of ship fever. She climbed carefully onto the bed beside Jackson, cradling his head against her shoulder, and began to sing an old lullaby her mother had sung to all the Davidson children. Gradually, Jackson stilled, his breathing becoming more regular. His eyes fluttered open, clearer than they had been for hours. "Lily," he murmured, seeming surprised to find her so close. "I'm here," she assured him, making no move to pull away. "Your fever spiked. How do you feel now?" "Like I've been trampled by a horse," he replied with the ghost of a smile, then more seriously, "Better though." "Clearer. Is Thomas all right?" "He's sleeping in his room. He stayed with you until he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer." Jackson's hand found hers where it rested on the bed. "And you've been here all night?" "Of course." They fell silent, the intimacy of their position suddenly apparent to both of them. Lily knew she should move, that it was highly improper for her to be lying beside him this way, and yet she couldn't bring herself to break the connection. "I meant what I said earlier," Jackson said at last, his voice low but steadier than before. "About falling for you, I thought I was dying, but I still meant it." Lily's heart quickened. "I've thought about you and Thomas every day since that storm," she admitted softly. "About the way you love your son, the way you've built this life for yourselves. I've admired you from a distance because you seem to want it that way." "I was afraid," Jackson confessed, his eyes holding hers in the dim light. "Afraid of letting someone in again, afraid of Thomas getting hurt if things didn't work out, afraid of my own feelings." "And now," Lily asked, hardly daring to breathe. "Now I'm afraid of wasting any more time," he said simply. "Life's too uncertain, too precious." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. Jackson, a small voice from the doorway, interrupted them. "Pa, are you better?" Thomas stood there in his nightshirt, his hair tousled from sleep, relief washing over his face as he saw his father awake. Lily quickly but carefully extricated herself from the bed, moving to the chair as Thomas hurried over. Jackson opened his arms to his son, wincing slightly but hiding his pain behind a smile. "I'm much better, thanks to Miss Davidson," Jackson assured him. "Come here, son." As Thomas carefully hugged his father, Lily slipped from the room to give them privacy and to compose herself. Her feelings for Jackson Yates had been growing steadily over weeks of brief encounters and longing glances, but now that he'd confessed similar feelings, everything seemed to be moving with dizzying speed. In the kitchen, Lily busied herself making breakfast, her mind whirling with possibilities and concerns. She was the town's schoolteacher, expected to maintain a certain reputation. Jackson was a widower with a young son, living miles from town on a ranch that clearly needed a woman's touch. And they'd spent so little time truly getting to know one another. Was this infatuation or something deeper? "Miss Lily." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Pa wants to know if you're coming back." Lily smiled at the boy, realizing with sudden clarity that her feelings extended to him as well. She'd grown to love this solemn, story-loving child almost as quickly as she'd fallen for his father. "Yes, Thomas, I'm coming back. But first, let's get some breakfast for all of us, shall we?" The next 3 days passed in a rhythm of caretaking, conversation, and growing closeness. Dr. Simmons visited daily, pronouncing Jackson's improvement remarkable and crediting Lily's nursing. The internal bleeding he'd feared hadn't materialized, and though the broken bones would take weeks to heal properly, the immediate danger had passed. Jackson insisted that Lily return to her teaching duties on the 4th day, assuring her that his ranch hands could look after him during school hours, and that Thomas should return to classes as well. Reluctantly, Lily agreed, though she found herself riding back to the Yates ranch each afternoon after school, often staying through supper to help with chores and keep Jackson company. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Lincoln was too small for such regular visits to go unremarked, especially from the unmarried schoolteacher to the widowed rancher. Mrs. Holloway sniffed disapprovingly when Lily passed her store, while others like Mr. Franklin and Sheriff Williams seemed quietly supportive. "You know people are talking," Jackson said one evening as they sat on the porch after Thomas had gone to bed. He'd progressed to using crutches, though he still spent most of his time resting. "People always talk," Lily replied, unconcerned. "It's what they do in small towns." "It could affect your position at the school," Jackson pointed out. "I don't want to be the cause of any difficulty for you." Lily turned to face him, her expression serious in the fading light. "Do you want me to stop coming?" "No," he answered without hesitation. "God, no, these past weeks. Having you here with us, it's like the house is alive again. Thomas is happier than I've ever seen him, and I—" He trailed off, searching for words. "And you?" Lily prompted gently. Jackson reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I find myself counting the hours until school ends each day, just waiting for the sound of Penny's hooves in the yard. I've never felt this way before, Lily, not even with Sarah, and I loved her deeply." "I've never felt this way either." Lily admitted, her heart pounding. It frightens me sometimes how quickly this has happened. Does it frighten you enough to walk away? Jackson asked, a note of vulnerability in his voice that she'd never heard before. Lily squeezed his hand. No, it frightens me because it matters so much, you and Thomas. You've become so important to me. Jackson's eyes, illuminated by the last golden rays of sunset, held hers intently. I love you, Lily Davidson. I think I have since that first night when you sat telling stories to my storm-frightened boy. The words, spoken so simply and directly, filled Lily with a joy so intense it was almost painful. I love you too, she whispered. Both of you. Jackson tugged gently on her hand, drawing her closer on the porch swing. When his lips met hers, the kiss was tender, almost reverent, a promise rather than a demand. Lily leaned into it, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. When they finally broke apart, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said softly. Not right away, I know it's too soon, but when you're ready, be Thomas's mother, be my wife, make this house a home again. Tears sprang to Lily's eyes. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I will. The weeks that followed were filled with healing Jackson's body mending slowly but steadily, and the remaining spaces between them closing with each passing day. Lily continued teaching, but spent every available moment at the ranch, learning its rhythms, helping where needed, and falling more deeply in love with both father and son. Thomas thrived with Lily's presence in their lives. His fear of storms gradually diminished as Lily taught him to count the seconds between lightning and thunder, to measure the storm's distance and track its passing. On nights when the weather threatened, she would sit with him, telling stories until he drifted off to sleep, confident in the knowledge that she would be there in the morning. By midsummer, Jackson had healed enough to ride again, though Dr. Simmons warned he would always have a slight limp. Lily had moved most of her belongings to the ranch, maintaining only nominal residence in her small room behind the schoolhouse to preserve appearances until their wedding. It was on a warm July evening, with fireflies dancing across the meadow and the scent of wildflowers heavy in the air, that Jackson Yates and Lily Davidson were married under an arch of roses on their ranch. Thomas stood proudly beside his father, holding the rings on a small velvet pillow sewn by Mrs. Franklin especially for the occasion. Nearly everyone from Lincoln attended, curiosity and initial disapproval having given way to genuine happiness for the couple over the preceding months. After the simple ceremony, as guests enjoyed food and dancing in the yard, Lily found a moment alone with her new stepson. Thomas looked handsome in his new suit, his blonde hair neatly combed, his blue eyes bright with happiness. "Are you really my mother now?" he asked, his expression suddenly serious. Lily knelt to his level, careful not to crush her simple white gown. "I am really your mother now," she confirmed, "if you'd like me to be." Thomas considered this carefully. "I never knew my real ma," he said thoughtfully. "Pa says she was beautiful and kind. He says you're beautiful and kind too." "Your mother will always be part of you, Thomas," Lily assured him. "I would never try to replace her in your heart, but I hope there's room there for me as well." The boy nodded solemnly. "I think she'd like you," he decided, "and I like having a ma who tells the best stories." Lily hugged him tightly, her heart full. "I promise to tell you stories for as long as you want to hear them." Later that night, after the guests had departed and Thomas had fallen asleep, exhausted from excitement, Lily stood on the porch with her husband, watching the stars emerge one by one in the deepening twilight. "Happy, Mrs. Yates?" Jackson asked, his arm around her waist. "Incredibly," Lily answered, leaning into his embrace. "I never imagined when I came to Nebraska that I would find this, a home, a family. I never imagined when that storm hit that it would bring me everything I never knew I was missing," Jackson replied, turning her gently in his arms. "Thank you for riding through the rain that night." As he bent to kiss her, a distant rumble of thunder sounded over the hills. Lily smiled against his lips. "Sounds like we might have a storm tonight. Thomas will be all right," Jackson said confidently. "He has his mother to tell him stories now. And I have a lifetime to tell them," Lily promised. As the first raindrops began to fall, over the years, the Yates ranch prospered and grew. Jackson's horse breeding operation became one of the most respected in the territory, and Lily continued teaching in Lincoln until the birth of their first child, together a daughter they named Sarah, after Thomas's mother. 2 more children would follow, a son named William and another daughter, Elizabeth. Thomas grew into a fine young man with his father's way with horses and his stepmother's love of books. By the time he turned 18, he was managing much of the ranch operation, allowing Jackson to focus on training and Lily to start a small lending library in Lincoln that eventually became the town's pride. As for storms, they remained a fact of life on the Nebraska prairie. But in the Yates household, they were no longer feared. Instead, they became opportunities for the family to gather in the warm parlor, with Lily telling stories while rain lashed the windows, tales of adventure and courage, of love found and cherished, of homes built and lives shared. And on particularly fierce nights when thunder shook the house, visitors to the Yates ranch might witness a peculiar tradition. The entire family, no matter how old the children had grown, would gather around the fireplace with blankets and books, listening as Lily's voice rose above the storm, weaving worlds of wonder until even the most restless soul was lulled to sleep, safe in the knowledge that some things like love and family were stronger than any storm could ever be.